Hi everyone, Mark aka BluebottleFlyer here, and it's time for another cartoon blog, talking about my cartoon creations. This time things are getting a little monstrous, as I'm focusing on my comic series, A Monster Thing. This comic, as the title suggests, is about a group of monsters, who are actually not very monstrous in personality, who mysteriously appear on a remote island, the imaginatively titled Monstro Island, and along with their human creator, they embark on quite the adventure, pursued all the while by a rejected rival monster and his cohorts. Out of all my comic series, however, I would say A Monster Thing is probably the more darker of the lot, because it contains a lot of action and more dramatic elements. A Monster Thing came about from one single character that I doodled way back while at school one day in 2002. In one class that I had, there was a greeting card hanging on the wall, and on the front cover was a furry green creature with a yellow nose and a big toothy grin. I liked the character so much that I decided to doodle my own character based on him, without outright copying the design, of course. I named the character the Green Monster, or simply Greeny, after his fur colour, and decided that he should be a friendly monster. I initially made Greeny half of a duo with another character of mine, PB the Polar Bear, who I created round about the same time. In 2004, I even made a one-off comic that featured PB, Greeny, and a group of characters. That comic would end up spawning my comic series The Surf Club, but that's a story for a future cartoon blog. The main inspirations for A Monster Thing were the Disney Pixar classic Monsters Inc. and the Japanese anime series Digimon Digital Monsters. I will admit a few of the monster designs were heavily inspired by some of the Monsters Inc. characters, and the evolution aspect of the monsters was all Digimon, as well as the action, of course. Out of all my comic series, A Monster Thing has the largest cast of characters, and while that means a lot of characters to draw for each comic, it does also mean variety as well. Each character has their own distinct personality and appearance. I'll cover the monster cast first. Each monster has their normal form plus their evolution form, which are more aggressive, powered up versions of themselves. And as I mentioned before, most of the monster characters were inspired by character designs from Monsters Inc. Greeny is the main monster protagonist, and contrary to how most people portray monsters, he's a gentle giant, big-hearted, friendly, and almost always positive, though he's also not afraid to stand up for his friends when there's danger. I already mentioned his greeting card inspiration, however, his personality was inspired by the character Sully from Monsters Inc. His evolution form is Red Fur. I think you can guess the inspiration for Loki. This three-eyed ball on legs is the joker of the pack, always pulling pranks and letting fly with some sarcastic comments. And if you were thinking Mike Wazowski from Monsters Inc. was his inspiration, you're not wrong. His evolution form is Balder. Screecho is the resident grouch. He's more or less the polar opposite of Greeny, and he has quite a temper on him. The mythical griffin was part of the inspiration for his design, and his evolution form is Growleron. Bane is the sole female monster of the group, named not just for her size, but also for her agility and her sprightly, sparky personality. Her evolution form is Sapling. A great gag is having a monster that's scared of their own shadow, and that's exactly what Bill is. He has an imposing figure, but he's more likely to scare himself than anyone else. His evolution form is Behemoth. Red Rock is a reptilian monster, and he's got a very easygoing, friendly attitude, although he's not very fond of confrontations. In other words, he's a peace-loving kind of fella. His evolution form is Gold Rock. Wolfgang, as his name suggests, is a canine monster and has a laid-back biker dude type of personality, and I say that because he does indeed like motorbikes. His evolution form is Phantom. Noodles is the resident geek, for want of a better word. He's the most intelligent of the monsters, and technology brings out both the best and worst in him. His evolution form is Robo-Noodles. Fuzz B, as you might have guessed by his name, is a little fuzzball. Just don't call him little. He's got an energetic, cheerful personality, and his evolution form is Metal B. Freddy is the only member of the group capable of flight. He's a fly creature and was inspired by the title character from the horror film The Fly. However, as you can probably guess, Freddy is far more friendly and better looking than that fly. And as well as that, he also happens to be a nod to a certain other fly character of mine. His evolution form is Swarm. Rounding off the protagonist monsters, we have Fergus and Grubbo, two monster twins. They're the comedy duo of the group, with Grubbo being the smartest straight man to Fergus's dim wit and silly antics, though they both share a big appetite for food. Their evolution forms are the Gemini twins, Gemini 1 and 2. Moving on to the human cast now. The main human protagonist is Edwin Flowers, the creator of the monster group. He's a scientist who works for a company called Soultech and is intelligent and adventurous, yet sometimes nervous as well. And I will admit his personality was partly inspired by my own. Lewis Flowers is Edwin's dad, also a scientist at Soultech, as well as an aviator, two interests he shares with his son. He's a very put-upon, but also a very dependable character. Clarissa Hart is one of Edwin's close friends, who also work alongside him at Soultech. Like Edwin, she's very adventurous, though far more confident as well, and there may or may not be a bit of a romantic spark between herself and Edwin. Nina Rogers is another of Edwin's close friends. She's a little more stoic than the others, in other words, a little bit more serious sometimes, but nonetheless she's a dependable and a determined person with a strong interest in biology. Rounding up the human protagonists is Ray DeMarco, the last of Edwin's close friends, and he's a wisecracking slacker with an eye for the ladies. Now, on to the bad guys. The main villain of the piece is Jabber, a monster who was originally part of the monster group, but was rejected because of his selfish and destructive tendencies, so he's got quite an axe to grind. He's probably the darkest character I've ever created, and his name was inspired by the poem Jabberwocky from the book Through the Looking Glass. He's the only villain monster to have an evolution form, which is Juggernaut. Every good villain needs some sidekicks, and Jabber has 3. JAGO, the brawny brute who thinks with his fists rather than his brain. Jewel, the femme fatale who'll use her charms to take down her opponents. And Jester, the wisecracking joker who's not afraid to play a dirty trick or two. Last but not least is the sole human antagonist, the sinister Richard Crenshaw, who also happens to be the CEO of Soultech. He's quite ruthless and cold-hearted, and he has some dark intentions indeed. Thanks for watching this blog. Hope you enjoyed hearing all about A Monster Thing, and if you'd like to see the comics and artwork of the characters, head on right over to BluebottleFlyer.deviantart.com. Bye for now.